Chapter 6. The pigeon coop became our home, and no Nazi was the wiser. I was old enough that my parents couldn't keep me inside all the time now. I took my mother's place in line for our rations, and sometimes my father and I were pulled off the street to work outside the ghetto, but each day we returned to our little sanctuary on the roof and slid the steel bars down tight to protect us. Mother began to talk again, and to smile, but every now and then I would catch her staring at the door to the roof, and I knew what she was thinking. The home invasions continued without warning, slowly bleeding everything of, of value the ghetto still hoarded. And once a week, on the Sabbath, Nazis would conduct resettlements when they came and took more people away, thousands at a time, pushing into trucks and taken to villages, quote unquote, in the east. Some people were taken, escaped, and sneaked back into the ghetto and told stories of camps where Jews were worked to death. My father told me not to listen to the rumors, but we were still careful to bar the big steel door at the top of the stairs every night, and every time we heard the cries and screams of a new resettlement, we huddled in fear. I was almost 13 years old now, and it was hard to remember any other life except for my daydreams of food. Bigo stew with meat and mushrooms and cabbage, roast chicken, cucumber salad, pierogi filled with potatoes, cheese, and onions fried in butter, cheesecake, apple tarts. I would have traded a week's worth of rations just to have another pot of my mother's delicious tomato soup. With each passing day, I grew thinner and thinner until hunger was my constant companion. I longed for nighttime and the blessed relief sleep brought. The only time I didn't think about eating was when I was asleep. One cold February day, the director of the Judenrat called the ghetto-wide meeting from Insgadi Square, and my father and I went to hear what they had to say. The director was not a popular man. The members of the Judenrat were hated throughout the ghetto for working with the Nazis, but any man the Nazis assigned to the Judenrat who refused were shot or hanged, so I didn't see any choice that they had. Some of the Judenrat police enjoyed their jobs too much. It was true, but there were others who tried to do what the Germans told them without making things worse for their fellow Jews. The square was crowded, but not everyone in the ghetto was there. Not nearly. The director could tell this, too. He checked his watch one last time and bent forward to speak into the microphone. "When I call for a meeting, you all must come," he told us. "Tell your neighbors, hiding away will not help." I glanced nervously at my father. "We're afraid we'll be taken away," someone yelled. "Or shot and killed in the street," someone else said. The director signaled for everyone to settle down. "My friends, I come to you with a terrible request, but one which I have no choice but to accede to. The Nazis have ordered me to give them 7,000 Jews to deport from the Krakow ghetto tomorrow morning." The crowd came alive with murmurs and sobs and shouts. 7,000 Jews, I thought, trying to comprehend a number so big. There had been resettlements going on all the while, but nothing on this scale, never so many people. "We can do nothing about this. 7,000 people will be deported, but we can choose who will go and who will remain." "You can choose, you mean?" someone yelled. "The Germans need good, healthy workers here in the ghetto," the director said. "You call this healthy?" a man cried. "I haven't eaten meat in a year." Others in the crowd shouted angrily that they were starving. I nodded, feeling my own hunger pains. "If we proved ourselves useful to the German war effort, they will take fewer of us away. They will keep us here and keep us alive," the director said. "We must therefore think carefully about who we send away and who remains. We must give them those who cannot work." More murmuring among the crowd. "Who can he mean?" I asked my father. Everyone in the ghetto worked. Even my mother had been taken into factories when she caught out on the streets. "My friends," the director said, "I must reach out my arms and beg. Mothers and fathers, give me your children." The crowd in the square erupted with rage. Angry shouts rised from every mouth. Fists shook in the air. An empty green bottle flew through the air and shattered at the base of the stage where the director stood. I was angry, but I felt more scared too. I held on to my father's arm. "They go to a better place," the director said, ducking a rock. "The children will be sent to resettlement camps." "Work camps," someone near me yelled. "Death camps," another person cried. "I am trying to save lives," the director roared. "Do you understand? Which is better, that 40,000 of us remain, or that the whole population perish? We must choose." They can't do this, I told my father. Why does he get to choose who goes and who stays? The reality was starting to hit me. I was going to be sent to a camp. I was going to be sent away from my mother and father, away from my home. The crowd yelled and argued with the director, surging toward the stage. My father put his hands on my shoulders and steered me away. Come, Yannick, let's go. I couldn't believe what I heard. Papa, how can he do such a thing? Because the Nazis have promised not to take him and his family, and people will do anything to protect their families. We should know that better than anyone. I don't want to go. Please don't let them take me, I said. I could feel myself trembling, but I didn't want to be let on how just deeply terrified I was. They won't, my father told me. I will protect you. He smiled. Besides, tomorrow you will no longer be a child, will you, Yannick? Do you think I've forgotten it's your birthday? To be honest, I had thought he would forget. Mother, too. There was nothing to mark the days now except the Sabbath, and we had to observe it in secret anyway. But I knew tomorrow was my 13th birthday, the day I would officially become a man. Your mother and I have nothing because how could we possibly hold a bar mitzvah for you? If we're caught celebrating it, we will be killed. I nodded. I'd been looking forward to my bar mitzvah for as long as I could remember, but now it wasn't going to happen. It couldn't. Still, my father said, like he could read my mind, we will celebrate it. But how? Tonight, father told me. Go to sleep in your clothes. That night, I lay awake in my clothes, tossing and turning. My bar mitzvah, I thought. A bar mitzvah is the ceremony in which a Jewish boy becomes a man, the first time he reads aloud from the Torah. Usually all of my school friends and aunts and uncles and cousins would have come to see me read in the synagogue. There would have been a kiddush after the service with challah rolls, potatoes, and chicken. My stomach growled just thinking about it. But of course there was no synagogue anymore, and no challah rolls or potatoes or chicken. A few hours must have passed before I heard my father stir. My mother, too. I sat up on my mattress and waited while my father pulled on his overcoat. We must be quiet, father whispered, like the night we went to Abraham's bakery. I nodded and stood. My mother came to me and hugged me tight. Come back to me, a man, my Yannick. Only come back. Oh, I will, I promised her. My mother kissed me on the cheek and walked us to the steel door that protected our rooftop home. She slid the metal bars back into place when we were through, and we made our way quietly down the stairs of our apartment building. Tonight there was no snow, but it was cold. We could see our breath from our noses. I pushed my hands down into my pockets as far as they would go and wished I hadn't outgrown my gloves. My father led me through the back alleys once again. Once we turned a corner to find another night stalker. It was a Jewish boy carrying a bag of something over his shoulder. Food, I guessed, smuggled through some hole in the wall, and all three of us gasped. When it was clear none of us were Nazi, we all hurried on our way without a word, but we were even more cautious than before. Our path took us toward a wall, and at first I wondered if father meant to take us out. We climbed into an old abandoned warehouse building that stood along a wall at Debrawki Street. Almost every window was broken and had opened to sighing wind, and the rotted wood floor had holes in it. There were stairs at the back, narrow and rickety, and occasionally missing a tread, and down we went into the basement. It wasn't exactly where I imagined celebrating one of the biggest milestones of my life, but I followed along without a word. There were men in the basement waiting for us. My uncles Abraham and Moshe, my cousin Dawid, two more men I recognized as friends of my father, and three men I did not know. One of them held a Torah scrolls in a burlap sack, saved perhaps from one of the ghetto synagogues before it was burned to the ground. The men whispered hello. Ordinarily, my uncles and cousins would have embraced us and talked, but everyone was too scared of being out after curfew to say anything anymore. My stomach grumbled loud in the silent basement, reminding me that now I was awake and I should be finding it some food. The stairs creaked behind us and we all turned. My heart was in my throat. If we were caught down here together with a Torah in hand, I would never become a man. I would be shot dead on sight. But the shoes we saw coming down were not the glistening boots of an SS officer. They were the brown leather soles of Mr. Tatarka from down the hall. Now we are 10 men, my father whispered. He smiled at me, and soon we shall be 11. I'm sorry we did not have more time for your studies, Yannick. Just do your best. The Torah scrolls were taken out and unrolled so I could read from them. My Hebrew was rough. Before the Nazis, I would have been at synagogue once or twice a week ahead of time practicing for this. But of course, that was impossible now. I muddled through, and if God or man heard anything amiss, neither of them called me on it. When I finished, my father chanted a blessing over me in the place of our rabbi who had been killed by the Germans. He prayed in Hebrew, then spoke in Polish. Janek, my son, he said, looking at me solemnly, you are a man now, with all the duties of an adult under Jewish law. You are now responsible for your own sins, but also for your own goodness. Remember what the Talmud teaches. Life is but a river. It has no beginning, no middle, no end. All we are worth, what we do while we float upon it, how we treat our fellow man. Remember this, and a good man you will be. I will, Father, I said. I had waited for this day, looking forward to it for years. Suddenly, it didn't matter that we weren't in synagogue and that we didn't have a feast waiting for us. Afterwards, the smile on my face filled me with pride. The men all shook hands and wished me a mazel tov before hurrying off. They're leaving tonight, most of them, Moshe told us, trying to escape before tomorrow's deportation. 7,000, never so many. We'll survive, my father told them. Come to our pigeon coop and we'll hide with us. Oscar and his river, Uncle Moshe said. You should talk some sense into him now that you're a man, Janek, the man who falls asleep on the river rounds. Chapter 7. Jews of Krakow, the announcement blared from the speakers. Get up, get out, get moving. 7,000 volunteers are needed for the resettlement camps. They asked for volunteers had not appeared in Zgadi Square that morning, and the Germans were not happy. Just after dawn, they drove through the streets of the ghetto in their trucks with big speakers on them, yelling at us to come out. It will be worse for you if you hide, they called. Come out now, and all will be forgiven. I didn't believe them. None of us did. Uncle Moshe, Aunt Gisela, and my cousin Zaitka were all there with us. They had decided to come hide in our pigeon coop. So had the rest of my aunts and uncles and cousins. There were 12 of us, all crammed inside the little shack on the roof. It was too crowded, but there was no way we would turn them away. Everyone was afraid of this new announcement, and we had seen too many smaller resettlements to take it lightly. At least all of us pressed together in the coop helped keep us warm. We couldn't start a fire or the smoke would give us away. A gunshot rang out. Crack! A woman screamed, pop, 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 went a machine gun. I scrambled a little to the window in our coop where we'd hung a blanket to hide us. Janek, no, my mother whispered, but I had to see. Across the street was a building that had been turned into a hospital, and I watched through a hole in the blanket as the Nazis pushed sick people out of the door down the steps. Some of them were too weak to walk and collapsed on the pavement. They cried out piteously. What's happening? Uncle Moshe asked. My heart was in my throat, but I managed to answer. Sick people, old people, they're taking them out of the hospital. They can't be taking them to the work camps for resettlement, Moshe said. His voice was quiet but urgent. They would never take the sick and the old away to work, taking them to die and anyone else with them. As I watched, the Nazis walked up behind the sick people from the hospital and started to shoot. Bodies fell on bodies, a great pile of them in the street. They fell with terrible screams. I pulled away from the window, unable to watch any more. No, I said, they're not taking them away. They're shooting them right here. Not even Uncle Moshe had anything to say to that. My mother reached for my hand and pulled me back to her. We sat like that for hours, listening to the gunshots and the screams in the street. My younger cousins huddled away next to their mothers, weeping on and off quietly. I was terrified, just like they were. But I was a man now, and I reminded myself, I was a man and I wanted to do something to stop the Nazis, to save my family. I asked myself over and over again what I could do to help, but I had no answer. Junk, junk. The big metal door to the roof rattled. Someone was trying to come through. I held my breath, listening. Junk, 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 junk. Would the steel bars hold? Would whoever was on the other side start shooting? I watched my mother's eyes grow wide again and watched her chest heave as she breathed faster and faster. She looked like she might scream, which would give us away for sure. My father hugged her close, holding her face to his shoulder. Junk, 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 junk. I waited for a gunshot. Waited. But then, for whatever reason, the rattling stopped, and whoever it was went away. We held still, none of us daring to breathe, waiting for someone to come through again. But an hour passed, and then another, and no one came back. That evening the trucks drove through the streets again with a new message for us. Jews of Krakow, unless everyone comes to Skotty Square for selection, this ghetto will be liquidated. If you do not come out of your houses by 6 p.m., every one of you will be shot on sight when we find you. Liquidated? Do you hear that? Uncle Abraham asked. Liquidated, like it's a business decision. They would get rid of us like so many old pairs of shoes. We should go, Moshe said. He stood. You heard them. They will kill us if we don't. They will kill us if we do, I said. They said they will liquidate the ghetto only if we do not come out. By hiding, we seal our death warrant, Moshe said. No, I said. I could feel my pulse racing. We can't trust them. It's a trick. I know how it is. It's a trick to get us to come out of our hiding place. You're still a boy, Yannick, even if you had your bar mitzvah. Listen to me, all of you. If we stay here and are found, we'll be shot, Moshe argued. He opened up the door to the coop. We have to go now. If we do what they say, they may let us live. My uncles and cousins started arguing about it. Dawid agreed with Moshe. Abraham wanted to stay. My aunts argued too, and the younger children started to cry. I looked to my parents to see what they wanted, but my mother's face was still buried in my father's shoulder, and that he was comforting her. Tears welled up in my eyes. I wasn't a boy, not anymore, not after my bar mitzvah, not after a year in the Krakow ghetto. I knew I had to be grown up now for my parents, for everyone. I pushed past Uncle Moshe and marched to the big metal door. I yanked off the steel bars and flung the doors open with a clang. There, I said, go. If you want to leave so badly, if you want to hand yourselves over to those killers, then do it right now. But I'm not. I've seen what the Nazis think of us, how they treat us. We all have. So they kill us if they find us here. If we go down there on our own, they will most certainly kill us. At least we hide here. There's a chance they won't find us. That's a chance I'm willing to take. My outburst shut everybody else up. They all stared at one another without speaking until my father rose. Yannick speaks with the wisdom of the prophet Isaiah, he said, softly, then quoted, Come, my people, and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until the wrath is past. He cleared his throat and looked round. Mina and I are staying too. One by one, others agreed, until even Uncle Moshe sat down and was quiet. I closed the door and slid the steel bars back into place, making sure they were tight. Night fell, and with it came more gunshots, more screams from the streets below. The deportation lasted for 2 days. But on the third day, when the sun rose, there were no more trucks in the streets, no more gunshots, no more Nazis. They did not liquidate the entire ghetto as they had promised. Once their quota was filled, they went away again. 7,000 Jews had been collected and taken away to die, but we were not among them.